Welcome back, friends. The pen is mightier than the sword. In the Christian vision of history, the defense of truth often begins not with armies, but with words. As Pius IX faced the torrent of mid-19th century ideological upheaval, he understood that the first order of business is confronting evil was to identify it clearly. Error gains its most dangerous power when it remains vague and undefined. True words.
Yes,
Once
absolutely.
named, it can be weighed against the law of God and then rejected, or if it's in a good place, accepted. But we're talking about errors, so it'll be rejected. The syllabus of errors was thus an act of moral precision, a catalog of 80 propositions that, left unchallenged, would corrode the faith of nations and the souls of the faithful. By wielding the pen rather than the sword, Pius IX engaged in a defense rooted in both uh, it's uh, it's French.
Mhm.
Gietze et carita, justice in rendering a clear judgment on false principles. Um, charity, justice in rendering a clear judgment on false principles. Charity in warning the world before those errors bore their bitter fruit. His condemnations were not mere negations, but guardrails marking the boundary between the city of God and the city of men. And Pius IX stood in the long line of shepherds who believed that truth, once spoken with authority, could still turn back the tide. So a syllabus in this context refers to a concise, organized list of errors identified by the Holy See, accompanied by brief, precise language that leaves little room for ambiguity. The brevity of the propositions in the syllabus is intentional. It allows for clarity of condemnation while directing the reader to a fuller explanation of the original papal documents from which the errors are drawn. So, like we said before, the structure 80 propositions. They are grouped, the organization's grouped under thematic headings such as pantheism, rationalism, indifferentism, socialism, and church-state relations. The sources these two documents use are many and varied. Earlier papal encyclicals, allocutions, and other magisterial acts. These are the key categories of errors. Faith and so in the faith and reason, fides et ratio, the rejection of rationalistic naturalism that denies divine revelation. Right? If you can't prove it, it's not knowable. Right? Ecclesiology, reaffirmation of papal primacy over the universal church. We see that communist China, right, where they
Yes,
want to
right. Yeah.
appoint bishops. Religious liberty, clarifications distinguishing authentic freedom of conscience from indifferentism, or as Sarah previously mentioned, libertinism, and
Mhm.
marriage and family. Denial of the civil authorities' competence over marriage as a sacrament. Um, Now, I guess we could stop there. I could go into some common misinterpretations.
Um, yeah, I think why don't you just, I mean, if we've got some time, let's just continue because I think it's helpful
Okay.
to keep them connected.
Okay. So, uh, myth number one, the church condemned all democracy and liberty. Clarification. The syllabus addresses specific errors tied to 19th century liberalism, not all forms of democratic governance or legitimate liberty. So, so there was, a misstatement there. Myth number two. The syllabus is a standalone papal document with no explanatory context. Clarification, no. Uh, each condemned proposition is a reference point, with fuller explanation found in the papal documents cited in the footnotes to the
Right.
original. And three, the syllabus rejects all forms of separation between church and state. Clarification. The condemnation applies to radical secularism that excludes religion entirely from public life,
Right.
not to legitimate distinctions of roles that respect divine law.
Yeah. The third myth that you're talking about, I think the separation of church and state is itself a myth. I
It's,
mean,
it
that has
is.
been
It
used
is.
so erroneously, and has no place, at least in American documentation. I can't speak to other people's constitutions, but that has no place either in our Declaration of Independence or in our Constitution. It does not exist. And if there were to have been a separation of church and state, quote unquote, it was simply to prevent for the establishment, right? And it was anti-establishmentarian in the sense that it did not permit for one particular strain of Christianity to be considered the main religion like you had in England. They did not want to fall underneath that same error that was going on in England, where one had to be of the same religious background as the king at that time. Um, which it's sort of interesting because we do have to remember that Henry erred. So when prior to Henry's abdicating his rightful role as the true Christian king, it was appropriate for his subjects to have the same religion as him. But the minute that he left that, the minute that he put himself in opposition of the true church, it was no longer right for any of his subjects to follow him into error. So since there was no consecrated leader of our country, meaning that God had not anointed anyone to be the head of our country, it would have been totally inappropriate for any leader in America to make us follow his faith because there could be no guarantee, um, which is what the consecration alleged to give the king, that he had the true faith, right? So anyway, that error it's bothersome to me because it's been the great canard that has silenced the church from, many people will cry that out loud without any awareness that it's a lie in and of itself, right?
I agree. And we have just a very few minutes left. And I want to highlight that, especially as President Trump yesterday, in the midst of negotiations with Ukraine and Russia, and all a goodly part of NATO heads were in the at the White House, and he talks about election integrity. And it's something I have been very much involved with for years, years,
Right.
years. And it does start with reading of the Constitution, not just federal, took classes on
Right.
that, but down into the state.
Right.
Every founding father of each of the 50 states and the federal presumed a working knowledge of the of sacred scripture in the King James Version. And
Right.
I'm not a real stickler on particular versions, depends on the type of study one's after and so forth, so on. But if you're wanting to understand our Constitution and the framework and the rights that flow from it, that is the version. And so
Right.
I will make an appeal because election integrity and that whole issue is front and center now. I mean,
Right.
it's laser hot. It's been going on, friends, for a long time. So what the work you're seeing coming forth is because of our patriots.
Right.
And I always appeal, read your state. It doesn't matter, California, Ohio, Texas, Virginia,
Right.
pick an old one, maybe Virginia, pick a new one, Alaska. You're going to
Right.
see similarity. You're going to see a particular
Right.
language, and you're going to see a mindset of humanity, and it's straight. it is straight from Scripture. So no, this
Right,
business of church separation of church and state,
right,
it's a vicious lie. It's a
right,
vicious lie. Let's just call it like it is.
right,
All right. All right. Less than a minute. Did it.
right. Well done. Yeah. I
All
just
right,
think, you
friends.
know, that rejection of when you reject one element of truth, you're going to reject all elements of truth, right? I mean, eventually, because it's a house of cards. You have to be. It's a very fragile construction, and man has to be very, you know, gentle when we're walking about issues like that. And I don't mean gentle like in as in don't touch anything, but cognizant. You know, very cognizant of the fragility of that upon which we stand.
Very good. Welcome till the next time, friends. Fide Sriracha.